Hi all, it's Celthyn here. Yeah, just gonna be playing some Spire as I discuss some things on setting boundaries. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So take the upgrade. So, yeah, setting boundaries is a difficult spell. Is a difficult skill to learn. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Setting boundaries like to be a very difficult skill to learn, especially if it's not something you were allowed to learn earlier in life. But they help keep you safe, and yeah, and they're also important for healthy and happy existence, above and beyond simple safety. So they're useful. Yeah. And then so a sensible place to start is going to be essentially figuring out some lines that you won't cross. Right. So if you've got a line in the sand, essentially, of something you're completely unwilling to do, that's very useful. And the other thing that's useful there is what behavior you won't accept around you, right? From the people that you're in community with, essentially, right? What behaviors do you find unacceptable for them to be exhibiting, right? And then that list is something, that you can update and recreate and, like, use it essentially as a touchstone for what's, when something happens, right? So, like, if you're asked to do something that you find unacceptable, you can go, no, I'm not going to do that. Or if you're, yeah, so if someone asks you to do something across the line, you can just say no, right? And if you're asked, and if someone is doing something that you find unacceptable, oh, yeah, okay, so if someone says, if you're being asked to do something that crosses the line, right, you can just say no. No is a full sentence. You don't need to explain. Now, of course, especially if it's a no in the moment rather than a permanent no, an explanation most definitely can be of assistance, but it's not a necessity, right? You do not need to run an explanation, right? And, it can help, especially if it's a no in the moment thing, to run a bit of an explanation, right? For what changes, what might change that no into a yes, essentially. But it's not a strict necessity, ever, right? And you do want to be able to, just say no, right? It's much easier said than done, but that is the core principle, is just say no. And yeah. And then when someone does something that, you don't like, when someone crosses a line, you can, again, as a, make it very clear, right? Be clear about it. Say something, right? I don't want to be around people who do X, for example, right? Is a very reasonable thing to say. And that, hopefully, is not too difficult to say, right? It can be, absolutely, but, right? Memorize it, practice saying it in the mirror, get used to using it as a sentence. Get used to saying the words, Well, saying the words alone isn't going to cause any harm, right? You know. And then it's, yeah, I don't want to be around people who do whatever it is, right? If you do it again, I won't hang out with you anymore. It's not pretty. It's not elegant, arguably, but it gets the point across, right? It sets a clear boundary that this behaviour is unacceptable. This is not something I'm willing to be around. And there is what you want to be doing, right? Is essentially making it clear that something, this is not a thing that you are willing to be around. It's probably not the right call, but... And then, yeah. So that's the thing that you're going to want to do. And then the other thing you're really going to want... Yeah. And then the other thing is, of course, right, setting boundaries online, right? Online is a good place to start and to practice this in many ways, right? It's a good way to, most social media, right, will give you a way to filter what you see. Or good social media will give you a way to filter what you see. Not everyone will, but generally speaking, you're going to be able to filter what you see. And then, so you can hide posts on topics that you don't want to hear about. You can, you can block accounts as well, right? You can make sure that what you're seeing is things that you want to see. And then from there, you can, make sure essentially that things are going to work for you. Right? It's not perfect by any means, but it's a step in the right direction, and that's important. Yeah, so that's one of the things you desperately want to be doing is essentially, well, yeah, and, YouTube also lets you tell it to not recommend channels, right? If you don't want to see a channel anymore, you can tell YouTube, hey, don't recommend this channel to me. And that's very useful, actually, as a thing to do. Because, yeah, it helps, if you're on YouTube a lot, then it helps guarantee that what you're getting on YouTube is things that you actually want to see. Which is important, yeah. And, yeah, just generally, right, the internet is it's sensible and smart, even, to start filtering what you're seeing on YouTube. Oops. But, yeah, so do that, right? Look through what's on YouTube and start filtering through it, right? And just leave, block accounts, set up filters, and just leave the bits of the internet that you don't like, right? Stop using websites that don't help you. And while that is definitely much easier said than done, it is going to help a lot, right? If you're not on the bits of the internet that are not helpful, right? Because the thing is the internet has a lot of useful things there, right? It's not like the internet doesn't have benefits to existing on, at least in some degree, right? But there's also a lot of bad on there, and not just bad, but, potentially, there's, like, actually bad on there. There's, things that are triggers for, like, just because they are, and it's not a thing that's going to necessarily be commonly warned against or anything like that. So setting up your own warning or filter for those can be incredibly valuable and incredibly helpful. Right, so those are all things that, so you probably want to be doing that. And of course, the internet is an excellent way to lose a lot of privacy, which we would imagine privacy as something that you have at least a level of concern over, right? We don't know for certain, but, we certainly value privacy. And so we would imagine that that's true for at least a reasonable number of people watching this. So Yeah, that can help a lot. And then, so essentially, you can leave those places and set yourself up boundaries for your existence on the internet. And that can be very useful. In essentially making sure that things are copacetic for you and make sense. Yeah. And yeah, the internet is a good place to practice this because it lets you avoid the confrontation with an individual component of setting boundaries, which is often something you can't avoid. In the face-to-face setting of boundaries doesn't let you avoid confrontation, at least to some degree, right? You do have to essentially tell someone that what they're doing isn't something you find acceptable, or that they're asking you to do something that you are unwilling to do. Whilst on the internet, well, people don't have to know that you blocked them, right? Or muted them, right? You can just do that, and then it's done. And that's that, So it can be, and especially something like YouTube channels, right? They've got no way of knowing whether or not you've hidden their videos from them, realistically, right? They're not going to know. All that's going to happen is that it's going to stop being provided to you as content on your recommended feed, and great, right? That's probably what you want if you're telling them not to recommend, right? If you just leave a website, well, what is anyone there going to do, right? There's really not much that anyone there can do about it unless they know you elsewhere, in which case, well, okay, hopefully their knowing you elsewhere is going to reduce any harm done from that, etc., right, in terms of that relationship. But yeah, practice on the internet, practice with yourself. Learn that setting these, learn that saying the words doesn't actually on its own cause any harm, right? And if it is, queuing things or triggering things, then and you're hopefully in a safer environment for learning that for the first time, essentially, or learning that, and then you can work on the deprogramming of that, right? But the first step, if you want to, is like, yeah, you're going to want to set boundaries, and setting those boundaries is going to be time intensive and is, going to be energy intensive potentially. But, the first steps are learning that you can say the words, learning that you can set the boundaries safely, and figuring out what you do want to set as boundaries, right? What is unacceptable to you, right? What are you not willing to see or hear? And those are things that are going to take time to learn, right? But you can set out an initial list, and you can start practicing, and that will help. It won't solve everything on its own or anything like that, but it will get you closer, and getting you closer is the first step. And at some point, hopefully, there will be less of a conscious effort, and it will just be a default thing that you just do. But the first step generally is starting down the path, essentially. And yeah, that's easier said than done, obviously, but yeah, start down the path. It will help, actually. It turns out that if you start setting boundaries, it's easier to keep setting boundaries than the other way around. Yeah. Cool. Well, I was thinking maybe I'd finish the run, but yeah. There's probably a lot of run left if this goes well, and well, currently it's looking reasonably promising. Not ideal, of course, but we're only at the start of Act 2, so yeah. I guess I'll leave you here. I hope this was of some use and some value, and yeah. This system signing out. Hope
to catch you all next week. Please do remember to like, subscribe, comment, especially if you've got any questions you want answered. Be happy to answer them either in the comments or in another video. So catch you all next week.